Hello, and welcome to Media Voice's first Media Brief episode. In a change from our regular weekly shows and our Conversations panel discussions, this is a short, sharp, sponsored episode, around 10 minutes, with a senior executive from a vendor working with publishers to make their businesses better. This episode, I'm speaking with Kieran Delaney, CEO at Apple News specialist FlatPlan, about how publishers can make the most of the platform. I started my conversation with Kieran by asking him what exactly is Apple News and how does it help publishers build an audience for their content.
Apple News has been around for quite a long time now. I think they launched in about 2015, and it's actually in many ways two products. So it's Apple News and Apple News Plus. They're both within the same app, but one of them is a free product, Apple News, and that brings in stories from ITV News, CNN, The Guardian, etc., etc. And then there's News Plus, which is a subscription product. So Apple sells subscriptions for $10 or £10 a month, and that gives you access to paywall content from people like GQ, Wall Street Journal, The Atlantic. So that's Apple News itself. There's about 140. Last time it was reported, there were 145 million active monthly users, and it's just dedicated to news, hence the name. So it attracts a solid kind of news-focused consumer, as it were. But yeah, in terms of how stories are surfaced, there's a number of ways, and this is what to us makes Apple News unique. There's a combination of personalization. So let's say you are within the health and wellness space. Apple News will understand if a reader has been searching in Safari for yoga or running. They'll understand when the person first signs up if they are interested in, the wellness space. They'll understand if you're following similar publication. And so that kind of data alone allows them to surface a really strong stream of content personalized for that reader. And if you're a business publication, for example, they may know that you've downloaded apps that are related to business or use the Apple Stocks app. And that personalization is combined with human editors and then an algorithm that understands the context of a story as well. So let's say, for instance, you're a movie publication, you've got an exclusive interview. Stories from a number of different publications appear on every article page. And so your interview could live below a story from the same movie or the similar actor, etc., from someone like The Telegraph. So it's a really good mix of routes for readers to find your content without actively searching for you.
Yep, oh, absolutely. I don't know if it's the right way to look at it. There's probably a credibility thing there. You're getting that halo effect that if your content is seen near something from a really well-known brand, then people potentially take your content a little bit more serious. Is that fair?
I think so. I mean, I think one of the kind of tricky elements to Apple News is that it's invite only nowadays. And that means, essentially what that means really is that Apple is primarily accepting publications that meet a certain kind of standard in terms of quality, editorial approach, etc., etc. And so I think from their perspective, they're looking for high quality original content. And so that means that if your content is reaching Apple News, that there's an element of that in it itself. But yeah, absolutely. If your story appears next to a story from The Atlantic or CNN, there's an element of credibility there, right?
And that's a big deal, right? Because in the world of fake news, misinformation, disinformation, being somewhere that there's that actual active curation involved is a positive.
Exactly. I mean, it's on Apple's shoulders, right? That it's not fully curated by Apple News editors, but there's lots of sections of the app that are, and so they have a role to play, as we all do within this world of trying to ensure that this is a quality output. There isn't this kind of low quality news content that's just journalism, for want of a better term.
How'd you get an invite?
Good question. So yeah, lots of publishers actually weirdly are already on Apple News from many moons ago. So we talk to a lot of publishers. They're like, we're not on Apple News, and we're like, no, you signed up a long time ago, and there is a login, so you've got your invite. It was a long time ago. There's that element to it. The other one, of course, is Apple reaching out and getting in touch. And most recently, that's been they're moving heavily into the kind of sports news space, as it were. And so they're actively looking for publishers that are reporting on specific topics, right? So that could be women's football or some new sport that's a huge deal now. So that happens as well. But there's another element to it, which is that we work quite closely with Apple. So for publications that feel like they would be a good fit, we actively pitch them to Apple. We circulate it around the Apple team, and then the invite comes at that point.
So Apple, not known for sharing, particularly customer data, can you get first-party data out of Apple?
You can't directly, no. So yeah, you're right. Apple is very much about privacy and not sharing data externally. You do get an analytics platform yourself when you have Apple News, and that gives you demographic data. It gives you a good amount of data on an article level, on a kind of demographic data level as well. But what we do is we try to make sure that we look at utilizing the kind of discoverability element of Apple News, attracting a big audience of that kind of very dedicated readers into your Apple News publication, building loyalty within the platform itself. And we do that with a number of tools. And then once there's loyalty built, all of the articles that we deliver into Apple News have call to actions that drive readers out into data capture strategies. So, that could be website registrations, newsletter subscriptions, app download. The feeling on this is that, there's this huge audience that live within Apple News. Once you've built loyalty, there's this real opportunity to turn that loyal reader in Apple News into a subscriber or a website registration or an app download.
So it's that idea that it's a starting point. You're actually getting the attention, you're in an environment that people trust, and then you're saying, oh, by the way, come over here and we've got a newsletter, or we've got a subscription, or we've got, whatever it is that lets you activate that data.
Exactly, yeah. And like anything, the better that funnel, the better that's going to perform, And what we try to do is say to publishers, look, make sure that you're directly speaking to that reader. If you have a niche newsletter that is going to appeal to a certain type of content, insert that call to action within that type of content. If you're a football publication, use your wording within Apple News itself to drive readers into the specific team they follow. It's all about targeting that reader in Apple News, reaching that 145 million active users, and then getting them into your own environment from there.
So it's shifting away from that spray and pray idea of fire and forget. You actually have to pay attention. It's not just, oh, we've shoved our stuff on Apple News, let's hope for the best.
Yeah, there's such an opportunity to utilize that discoverability element for our own use within our own environment. And it's just that effort to say, well, what do we need Apple News to do for us? And then building an output that works in that way.
And is that where you guys come in, helping advise and helping set up, optimizing the content on Apple News?
Exactly, yeah. So we are, we're a software business, but really we start out from the perspective of each publication is completely different. So every publication has its own needs for Apple News. Often that is now newsletter subscriptions as a kind of starting point to that funnel. What we do at the start of every process is we say, what do you need this to do? What's this about? Is this about advertising revenue directly from Apple News, or is this about a paywall strategy you have on your site? Is it about data capture through newsletters? And then we build each article as it lives within Apple News to work towards those needs. So it could be a really nice large graphic call to action on every article that says we have an app and it's great and this is what it does. Download it, and then you get a direct link from there from the App Store itself.
Do you find that people are focused more on first-party data rather than the potential for ad revenue or the potential from subscription revenue?
I think it has to be a mix, right? I think that one of the reputations Apple News has had in the past has been for ad revenues to be fairly low within Apple News itself. I think part of that again is about attention, right? So again, you can kind of switch it on, deliver, run the kind of standard ad setup in there, and that's one way of doing it. But again, another way of doing it is looking at the mix, and understanding what your priorities are and building it that way. But by all means, have a really strong waterfall system with ads within Apple News itself. But whatever you do, make sure that Apple News is driving readers into your own environment. That's how we see it, and I think it's vital to try and own that data as much as possible, right?
Publishers have been burned by big tech regularly. Why go to Apple? Is that another situation where we'll all be going, oh my God, we're so disappointed that they've ignored us again?
Yeah, I think there's a big difference between the kind of social media platforms and news platforms like Apple News and Smart News. I think the social media platforms have pretty much proven that news isn't a priority to them recently. But news platforms like Apple News, Flipboard, Smart News, etc., they only exist because of publishers, right? We sit in a place where we aid publishers to make sure they reach those platforms and make the most of it, and try to make the most of it as directly and quickly as possible with first-party data. The risk of news aggregators deprioritizing news is zero, because the business model relies on it. But it's kind of the other element to it is this is where a lot of news audiences live now. They open their phone, Apple News lives on it, they go directly through to it. And I think it's about ensuring that is working for you. That if you've got this audience that are living there, you get to them and then you make the most of them yourself. Apple News is generating billions of revenue for Apple itself, and they're a services company now as much as they are a product company. So they've been around, for since 2015, and they're not showing any signs of changing that strategy. It's a sticky, useful app, and it generates revenue. And in terms of investment, there's a big difference as well, I think, with news platforms and social media, in the sense of it's taking content that you're producing and it's delivering it to an audience. What you do once that audience engages with that content is down to you in many ways, but it's not the same level of investment in some ways of managing social media platforms, managing commenting, managing the way that you're producing video specifically for the platform. It's much more about, there's this audience here, what can we do? What can we get from that audience? How can we get them to help us grow our business, really?
So I'm a publisher. I haven't made the leap into Apple News. What's my starting point?
Starting point, of course, is looking into how you get onto the platform itself, and that's something that, if you would ever like to talk about that, do reach out to us. We can always give you some advice on how to get in contact, or how to understand if you're on there already. I think the other element to it really is just, again, start out by thinking about what you need from this platform. It's sizable. It's dedicated to news. The audience is not there to look at cat pictures. They're there to read news content. What do you need from them? What do you need from Apple News itself? And if it makes sense within your strategy, look into that and follow that strategy through. And again, that's something we're always happy to talk to publishers about. Is it a good fit? Is it not? Certain publications, it's just not a good fit for. We work with B2B publications, but really this is a consumer product more than anything else. And start with that. Start with the idea of, what has this got to do for us? And does it fit with what we need to do and how we gather our audience?
Thanks so much to Kieran for speaking with me. If you would like to learn more about FlatPlan and how they can help you reach, retain and own an audience on Apple News, please go to FlatPlan.io. And if you want more from Media Voices, go to voices.media and check out our archive of almost 300 podcast episodes, or sign up for our daily Media Roundup newsletter.